Starting in Rome, up to Florence, on to Venice and Lucerne, followed by Paris and ending up in London. We're presenting here a 2-minute summary of the entire tour. In this case, we're in St. Peter's in the Vatican. The tomb of Hadrian, the Castel San Angelo, is another one of the highlights of Rome. We do a lot of walking on our tours as well. It's the best way to see a place, so we provide walking tours. On to Florence, then to Venice. From Venice, the trip continues north through the Alps to Lucerne, Switzerland. And here, one of the great pleasures is riding a boat on the lake. Lake Lucerne is the third biggest lake in Switzerland. Our hotel, the Balance, is located right on the lakefront in Lucerne. You can ride a cog railway up a mountaintop to Pilatus or up Mount Titlis. Our tour continues north through Europe by train, and the next stop is Paris, and we'll enjoy 3 days in this spectacular city. Some fine dining in the outdoor cafes. The stained glass of Sainte-Chapelle is one of the most compelling sights in the city, and they have concerts here in the evening. From Paris, we continue north by train, going under the English Channel. Coming to London, we'll have several days in this fabulous city, a world-class capital, enjoying more walking tours, and we'll see Covent Garden, Soho, Piccadilly. And that's the end of the summary of our tour. Now we begin the actual tour itself. Launching right into a little orientation walking tour. Of course, we take a little rest when we first land in the city, take about 2-3 hours, and change clothes, lie down and relax in the hotel. But then we want to get out and see the city, and our hotel is right in the center, so it's very easy to step outside the door. And before we know it, here we are at Giolitti's, one of the best ice cream shops on the planet. And we always make it a ritual to visit Giolitti's as part of our first orientation walking tour. This is gelato at its best. The ice cream is very creamy, very rich, delicious, and served at just the right temperature. So we all grab a cone and continue on our walk. It's the perfect walking snack. Bust out those cameras for some of these elaborate Baroque facades of these churches in Rome. We'll be seeing a lot of ancient history on the trip, and one of the oldest buildings that we'll see is the Pantheon. And there's a lively piazza in front of the Pantheon with cafes and fountains.
I saw his film. I saw your film.
It's the trick in Rome. You put your finger under the spout and water will shoot out the top. This space is called Piazza della Rotonda, and it's a very lively center of the city with its cafes and, most of all, this great historic attraction of the Pantheon itself. There's a massive front porch called the Portico with huge granite columns that are believed to be original features from the earliest version of the Pantheon, which was constructed around 27 BC, burned down 100 years later, and then rebuilt by Hadrian around the year 118. The interior is a massive dome. It's the largest cement dome ever constructed in the world. It's 142 feet high and 142 feet wide. These dimensions lend an element of perfection and harmony to this noble interior. Immediately adjacent is the Hotel Senato, which is typical of the nice, smaller hotels in Rome. And around the corner is Bernini's fantasy of an Egyptian obelisk on the back of an elephant that he carved in marble. It stands in front of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, the only true Gothic church in Rome. It's got pointed arches and a side chapel painted by Filippino Lippi. And there's a statue of Christ bearing the cross carved by Michelangelo, standing just in front of the altar in the nave of Santa Maria sopra Minerva. There are some Baroque elements, there's Renaissance elements, and the Gothic pointed arches, making this a nice church to visit. You go out the back door and you'll come out right near the Piazza Sant'Ignazio, which is a Baroque fantasy of Rococo buildings. You'll see lots of cats in Rome, more cats than dogs it seems. Time for another snack. We've had our ice cream at Giolitti, and now an espresso and maybe a quick bite at one of these stand-up snack bars. You'll find these all over Rome, and it's a very economical place to grab a bite, especially if you're standing up. If you sit down, the price is maybe twice as expensive, but then you might need the rest, so you might want to pay the extra money for a seat, or just grab some fruit on the run. The ordinary life on the streets of the city provides an ever-changing spectacle of entertainment here in Rome. And we do our walking tours, and we'll tell you as we walk about the sights so that you're not wondering what you're looking at. This is the ceiling of Sant'Ignazio, designed by Pozzo, a fabulous church, a Jesuit church. It has angels carved in marble, columns of lapis lazuli and marble, and particularly the ceiling. This is one of the greatest illusionistic paintings ever created. The columns and arches are painted onto the ceiling of the nave of the church to give you the impression that the church extends upward right into heaven, where we see St. Ignatius going up to the arms of God. The facade of Sant'Ignazio is quite similar to the Church of the Gesù, which is just a few blocks away and is the mother church of the Jesuit order. Piazza Sant'Ignazio is like a little stage setting with these Rococo buildings and their facades and this narrow maze of winding streets behind it. And we come across another one of the many street water fountains. Remember how it works? Block the spout and the water shoots out that little hole on top. We're right at the Temple of Hadrian. This was dedicated in the year 145 to the great emperor just after his death, and there are 11 massive granite columns still standing, and the original wall is still here. It's been incorporated into the modern stock exchange of Rome. Crossing the busy Corso is a minor challenge for our group from Hawaii. It's a real art to crossing the streets in Rome. Even though we have a crosswalk, the cars may or may not stop. They usually just try and swerve around you. So when you're crossing, don't stop in the middle of the road. Keep on walking, even if it looks like they're about to hit you. And then you will come on the Fountain of Trevi, just another block away. One of the greatest fountains ever constructed. It was completed in 1762 by Nicola Salvi. It's built right into the facade of a palace. And out front is the famous basin where you toss your coin. It was depicted in that great movie, 3 Coins in the Fountain. The statue in the center depicts Neptune, the god of the ocean. Of course, you know the routine here at Trevi is you throw your coin into the fountain, and then you shall return someday to this eternal city. Notice this horse is fairly calm, being led on by a Triton, whereas the horse on the other side of Neptune is a wild and unruly beast. This depicts the 2 moods of the ocean. Another great fountain is at the Spanish Steps, carved by Bernini's father. And around the corner from the Spanish Steps is one of our favorite restaurants in the city called La Rampa. It's outdoor dining. It's a modest price. There's a huge buffet, and there's lots of wine and pasta. And it's a good spot for an early meal. Sometimes the restaurants in Rome don't even open until 8 p.m., but La Rampa is basically open all day and on into the evening, so it makes a good spot. But if you get there at 8 p.m., you'll probably have to wait online for a table. There's a lot of other eating choices, naturally, in this great city. You can have a takeout meal from one of the many food counters, such as this, with the cheeses and the meats and the different kinds of salads and breads and wines, fruits. And you can just have a picnic meal on your own if you wish, or a light snack at a sidewalk cafe. There's all kinds of other shops out on the streets of the city, particularly flower shops. And there's many furniture shops where they do very fine restoration work and put the furniture on display in a gallery-like setting. Just walking along through the streets of this old heart of ancient Rome is a real treat, looking in the little courtyards at the fountains and poking your head into these little shops. This is the heartbeat of the city, the small, family-operated stores. This harkens back to the days of the Renaissance, when a craftsman would operate a small shop and make some statues, do some restoration and repair, and do some painting, and generally be a versatile artist and a craftsman and a salesman all at the same time. And you can purchase goods in these little shops. It's a very nice place to buy a small statue or a wooden frame or a little carving to bring home with you, a souvenir of your trip to Rome, one of these classical statues, a reproduction from antiquity. This particular neighborhood has been filled with shops like this for nearly 2,000 years, for it's the heart of the ancient capital of Rome. The buildings are not quite that old, but they seem to be ancient. They're certainly 300, 400, 500 years old, and they certainly show it. And yet there's modern life interspersed. There's people walking with their cell phones everywhere, modern cars, scooters, very nice hotels. This is the Raphael, a small hotel of about 80 rooms, one of the finest in the city. We're in the neighborhood just beyond the Piazza Navona. We're heading towards Santa Maria della Pace. Walking through the streets of this part of the city is one of the great pleasures that we share with our tour of Rome with our groups from Hawaii, bringing you to such sites as the cloister designed by Bramante, who later went on to build St. Peter's. The small piazza in front of Pace and the facade of the church and the design elements that link the facade to the nearby buildings were all designed by Pietro da Cortona, and it forms one of the great landmarks in the history of urban design and architecture, for it presents a real comprehensive and harmonious space united together by these architectural elements. Built in the 1650s and 1660s. Cortona made the street just wide enough for a horse and carriage to be able to turn around and exit. Nowadays, there's no horses and carriages. We've got scooters and cars and pedestrians, and the street just in front is a very lively place in the daytime, and at night it bustles with hundreds of people here standing in front of the cafes, holding their drinks in their hands, having a good time, which we'll show you a little bit later in this program. This little intersection has a charming magic to it. It's just between the Piazza Navona and Pace, and it's a quaint neighborhood hangout. Casual place, you can stop and have a chat, poke your head into some of the workshops nearby, sit down at the cafe, and enjoy the life of the streets of Rome in the modern day set in this ancient place. One shop after the next will surprise you with its delightful contents. They make the most of the space here, packing as many things as possible into these narrow shop fronts. Are you ready to eat?
Luigi.
Right. Okay. These friendly cooks steer us around the corner to the front of the restaurant, and we find ourselves at a classic sidewalk trattoria named Luigi's. We're on a little square just off Corso Vittorio Emanuele II, across from Piazza Navona, heading towards Campo dei Fiori. And on this square, there's 3 different restaurants, so it makes a very good place to eat. You can have a simple meal, such as this spaghetti with some fresh tomatoes and basil and light mozzarella cheese. The Italians would look at that strictly as an appetizer, and then they would launch into their main meal with a meat dish or some fish or chicken. But if you'd rather have a light lunch, that's fine with the restaurant. You could just have some antipasto or just some pasta. It's only about $7 or $8 for a very nice plate of spaghetti in a typical restaurant. And save the main meal for dinner, because after all, we're travelers. We're just having a quick bite, sit down, have a rest, recharge your energy cells, and then get moving for an afternoon of further explorations in the city. Which is what we're doing now as we walk into the neighborhood of these quaint and characteristic old streets near Palazzo Farnese. We'll be walking down Via di Monserrato and Via del Pellegrino, heading towards Campo dei Fiori. And it's just one of the nicest and quietest parts of town. Via Giulia is nearby. We'll be heading down there in just a short while with our Hawaii Geographic Society walk. You can spend at least 3 days in Rome like this, walking through these narrow little back streets, mixed in with your visits to the great palaces and the museums and the historic landmarks of the city that draw a lot of attention. But just the simple details of daily life can provide a very rewarding experience to the observant traveler. And walking these out-of-the-way streets gets you far from the tourist track and makes you feel for a bit like an average Roman yourself. Time for more food. This is a truffle salad, one of the great dishes that you'll find at our personal favorite restaurant in Rome, which is Il Cardinale. It's located on the tiny street of Via delle Carceri, just near Campo dei Fiori. You might try their green gnocchi with a spinach and potato base, or any one of a number of delightful dishes. The lasagna is excellent here. There's some truffles in the lasagna as well. Pasta e fagioli is a bean soup that's a staple in Italy. The Mediterranean salad here has got 12 different kinds of greens and tomatoes and onions, mostly purchased from the nearby outdoor marketplace of the Campo dei Fiori. Save room for dessert. There's a delicious ginger ice, or a creme brulee fantasy, looks like a Picasso painting. We couldn't say this is the best restaurant in the city. That's not possible. It's just one of many greats and our favorite. Walking this lively neighborhood at night is like being part of a huge street party in the neighborhood of the Piazza Navona.
Yeah.
This is a nightly thing?
Every night, yeah.
Kalakaua Avenue, really.
There's really not a lot of organized entertainment to participate in at night in Rome, so we find the best way to use your evening is have a nice meal and then go for a stroll after dinner, particularly in this neighborhood of the Piazza Navona. It's very safe. There's lots of people out here every night, very comfortable. You might be a tired tourist and back in your room instead, missing out on all of this Roman activity that's going on. That's understandable, but try and get out in the evening if you can, and then you'll get that much better sleep at night, and the next morning you'll be recharged and ready to go at it again. Here we just step outside the door of the hotel, and we're in the middle of the city already, traveling Roman style. With Hawaii Geographic, we like to give the traveler and you viewers an authentic experience and get around as the locals do. Sometimes we'll go by public bus, other times we'll have a private bus with a private city tour. But today we're just going about 1.5 miles down the Corso, and instead of walking to begin the tour, we're taking the city bus. This gives us a little head start on our morning agenda so that we can arrive at the beginning of our walk nice and fresh and ready to go. This morning we're seeing another part of the historic center of town, walking along together. Just a block away is some ancient Roman ruins and some cats. This is the Area Sacra, or Largo Argentina. Surrounded by modern busy streets, it's a peaceful oasis of ancient history. Tall columns standing proud, and it gives refuge to the kitty cat population. There's about 100 cats living here because humans are not allowed down in the archaeological site. Continuing along on our walking tour, we're heading into the area of the town called the Ghetto. It's not a rundown, dilapidated space like you might think the name implies, but it was the part of town where the Jewish population was restricted to back in the 17th century. One of the highlights of the Ghetto is the Fountain of the Turtles. Our Hawaii group enjoying very much this little Baroque fantasy. According to legend, this fountain was built overnight by a young nobleman who was trying to impress his girlfriend's father, the Duke of Mate, whose palace is right here at the courtyard. And in the morning, the Duke woke up and saw this wonderful new fountain and approved his daughter's wedding. The grandiose and coffered dome of San Carlo ai Catenari was built in the 1640s. Churches like this had tremendous amounts of money and artistic efforts thrown into them, for the church was the most important and powerful institution at the time. Artists of today have 1 million different ways and outlets in which to express their creativity. But several hundred years ago, during the Renaissance and during the Baroque and the Counter-Reformation, most artistic efforts went into glorifying the institution of the church. They created virtual museums of astonishing architecture and paintings and statues that are certainly worthy of a visit while you're in Rome. Other places to visit in Rome include the famous outdoor marketplace of the Campo dei Fiori, and we're getting there by walking along the Via Gubernare, And we find ourselves at the market in the morning, which is when it's at its liveliest. There's lots of fruit and vegetable vendors here. You can also get herbs and spices. For hundreds of years, this has been a very busy outdoor marketplace. Cardinals and noblemen used to rub shoulders here with fishmongers and foreigners in the piazza's market, making it one of the liveliest areas of medieval and Renaissance Rome. And today's market retains much of this traditional and lively atmosphere. Notice the delivery vehicle. It's a very humble and down-to-earth kind of place. And it's a fine spot to see some exotic food, such as porcini mushrooms and big fat grapes. You can wash them off right at the street fountain and start eating. It's a good place to stock up on picnic supplies, as our Hawaii group is doing and delving right into it. There's also some cafes around the piazza that make a pretty good pit stop, and they open later in the day and serve complete lunches or afternoon snacks. And in the evening, this is also a lively spot, not for a marketplace, but for restaurants. By midday, the market closes down, and they sweep the streets and put the stalls away and transform this into a lively cafe square. Campo dei Fiori means field of flowers. Originally, it was once a meadow in ancient Rome. And now it's a neighborhood gathering spot. Notice how many crates this fellow is piling up on his old rickety bicycle. This guy's working hard. He's got to push these crates around the corner to their storage area for the evening before opening up again tomorrow morning. Every morning you'll find a market at Campo dei Fiori. This intriguing alleyway lined with mirrors is so inviting. We had to walk through and see what's on the other end, and were rewarded with this ancient courtyard. Typical of Roman residential courtyard dating back 400, 500 years, even 2,000 years ago. This is how the ancient Romans lived. And they're still living this way today. Beautiful and charming and quaint and picturesque. Just a little cul-de-sac to pop into and have a look around out, and then we resume our walking tour, heading to the Palazzo Farnese and the big square in front of the Grand Farnese Palace. Michelangelo played a role in designing the facade of the Farnese Palace back in the 1540s, and the clear horizontal lines contribute to a masterpiece of balance and proportion here. These granite tubs were found at the Baths of Caracalla and hoisted over to their present location. Just behind the palace, you'll find this gargoyle fountain, which is typical of the many little fountains scattered around the city. Fontana del Mascheroni. We're now heading down the Via Giulia, which was the main street of ancient Rome back in the 17th century. It connected the Vatican with the heart of the commercial center of the city. That bridge was built by Michelangelo to connect the Farnese Palace to the Palazzo Farnesina just behind it. Walking along through these streets is one of our favorite activities in touring Europe with Hawaii Geographic Society. We go back to Europe 3 times each year, and we always like to get our travelers off the beaten track like this, get away from the normal tourist haunts, and we can do this because we spend 2 or 3 days in each city that we visit. Ponte Sant'Angelo. That's Hadrian's tomb in the background, and it makes a perfect spot for a group photograph with our Hawaii group. And we're seeing history come to life as we walk through these ancient streets of Rome.
Oh, it's just beautiful. It's wonderful. This is great. Something I thought I'd never see. It's wonderful. Thank you.